Okay, it's going to be a classic album review of DMX's first album. This is It's Dark and Hell is Hot. Reason I'm doing it, I just wanted to do it. There's really no reason aside from it. I mean, in terms of like any anniversary or any reason why, I mean, it actually timed out pretty good. Now that I think about it, we're at the 27th anniversary of May 19th, 1998. DMX was 27 years old when the album was released. So if you want to find the tie-in in terms of why it's going to be uploaded today, that's why. But, honestly, I felt like reviewing it. I've been listening to this thing like nonstop last couple of months. I canceled Apple Music. There's just really nothing coming out in today's era of hip hop that has me that interested. I think during the summertime we'll get a couple of good stuff coming out. Yeah, Billy Woods, A$AP Rock, Snoop just released a new album, which sounds pretty damn good. So hopefully, things get better, but we'll see. But in the meantime, I wanted to review Biggie, Life After Death. I passed on it. I don't know exactly why. I still love the album. I definitely love it. But at the end of the day, I think the problem with Life After Death is I think Puffy, it's kind of like Puffy's album. It just definitely feels like that. So that's part of the reason why I didn't feel like, reviewing it. But with DMX, It's Dark and Hell is Hot. It's really, really interesting, man. This is one of the biggest surprises, I think, in hip hop history. I was kind of late to the party on DMX. I mean, only if you're like a diehard fan that was keeping up with the source in the early 90s would you even know who DMX was until 1998. I mean, he was involved in the source's unsigned hype in 1992, and then eventually he got to deal with Columbia and Rough House, who also had like Cypress Hill. They had Criss Cross, but I don't know if DMX was really ready at that time. When you hear some of his early stuff, especially the song he did with Mike Geronimo and Jay-Z, he definitely sounded like Onyx impersonator. So I just think, he definitely needed a little bit more seasoning, and then everything just kind of came together, for It's Dark and Hell is Hot. I believe Leor Cohen from Def Jam, I think he went to a club and he saw him and he was blown away by him, and then he signed him to Def Jam. And then slowly but surely, the hype started getting bigger. That whole 1997 to 98 school year, it seemed like each and every month he had an appearance that just increased the hype. The first time I think I heard DMX was it was actually on Mike Geronimo's, that posse cut on the How to Be a Player soundtrack, where DMX had the first verse. He's like, he had that line where he said, "Fear is better than respect." So that was the first time I heard of DMX. Usual Suspects, that's the name of that song. Mike Geronimo was on it. I think the Locks were on it. There's like two different versions of that song, but that's the first DMX song I think I ever heard. And then every single month, you just heard more and more of him. You heard him on Mace's 24 Hours to Live, where he stole the show. He had the last verse. LL Cool J's 4321, he was actually on that song, which, maybe one of the more controversial rap songs ever. That's where the LL Cool J and cannabis beef started. And then he was on Lox's Money, Power, Respect. That verse is incredible. That really got people excited. I'm probably leaving out some other stuff, but yeah, DMX was on a lot of songs to hype up this album, and he had a track called "Get At Me, Dog." Like that was the first single. Funkmaster Flex used to play it all the time. The song got big, and then they actually filmed it in the tunnel. And Funk Flex even said on the radio that this is the biggest song in New York City right now. Then they had the video, and then the single comes out with "Stop Being Greedy." "Stop Being Greedy" was another great song, a dope concept, which featured the alter egos, the good side and the bad side. So that was great. So I had the single, but when the album came out, I passed on it. I don't know why, and I'm frustrated with myself for passing on it because, even the source said the album is going to burn throughout the summer of 1998, but I was a little bit late to the party on it. I had so many friends that had the album, so I dubbed it onto a tape. And later on in 1999, this was the first time I ever bought like a burned CD, and I definitely regret it. I feel like guilty about it. But yeah, 1998 going into 99. The really rich kids had like, computers that you could burn CDs with. So I bought it off of, one of those kids. But I would definitely regret it. But I was just shocked. The album really didn't take out off until like the fall of 1998 when Ruff Ryders Anthem, that video came out. Like everybody, wanted to buy this album. This ended up selling like 4 million, 5 million copies. I had no idea it was going to be this successful, but like to me, like it sold really well at first. Like it debuted at number one. It did like 200,000 the first week. And it did go platinum like during the summertime. But by the time you get to like October, like the video is popping, like you have the hard song and then you got the song for the girls, and all of a sudden it's number one at Billboard again, and it's doing 4 million. I think eventually it did 5 million. So I was just like blown away by how raw DMX was, and that he could sell like 4 million, 5 million. This is like doing like doggy style numbers. So it's an incredible debut album. But hey man, let's get right down to it in terms of the track listing here. What did I want to say about this before we get going? I want to say this about DMX, and rest in peace to DMX. He's been dead since I believe 2021. I think he died like right before WrestleMania. But when you're looking at 1998, I mean, Tupac's 96. It really does come close. And for some reason, Tupac doesn't get a lot of credit, for releasing two albums in 1 year. Maybe because the second album was Machiavelli. Like people just kind of, it just seems like he doesn't get the wow factor that DMX gets. Like when he released Flesh of My Flesh, Blood of My Blood at the end of 98, it was really shocking. It shocked the shit out of me because there was so much good stuff coming out. Method Man's album, that release date was crazy. You had Redman, you had some No Limit guys like Mystical and then Juvenile. I mean, it was a crazy time. And then the icing on the cake was DMX, releasing Flesh of My Flesh right before Christmas. And it was just like, wow, like I can't believe he, released two albums back to back. And, both albums were great. I mean, Common and some other rappers would say, yeah, they kind of sounded the same, but they were still both great albums. I think it's a great debate. It's Dark as Hell is Hot versus Flesh of My Flesh. It's more of a debate than people think. Personally, I would go with Flesh of My Flesh, but if you're going to tell me that It's Dark is the better album, I'm not going to disagree with that. But yeah, I think, there's a lot of similarities in terms of, what Tupac did in 96 to what DMX did in 98. And then when you're doing some research of the album, like what kind of goes under the radar is DMX was very, I don't think he really knew Tupac. I understand he met him right before he died and everything was okay, but he was really critical of him with some of the stuff that was going on in 96. And, he did a lot of freestyle disses to him. So, there was a lot of people that just didn't like Tupac on the East Coast because of, the content that was coming out, the harshness and, basically taking shots at the East Coast as a whole. And, I think DMX is definitely one of those guys that took exception to it. So Get At Me Dog is really originally like it was a Tupac, diss track. But, there's a lot of similarities between those two. I think they're very different, but they're very similar in terms of, how emotional they can be. And, they both have very similar looks. But to me, they're very, very different. And, it doesn't really surprise me when DMX says, I'm not the next Tupac. I'm the first DMX, because like, I think once you get to know both guys, they might seem a little bit similar at first, but once you know both of their discographies and you get to know them as people, they couldn't be more different. So I get the comparison. It's an interesting comparison, but to me, they're totally different. But yeah, not the bottom line is 98 was huge for DMX. I mean, I think he became the biggest rapper in the world. He not just filled the void of Tupac. I mean, Master P was the, he really capitalized on Tupac's death more than anybody. But like when you really think about it, though, who really filled the void internally in your heart? It was definitely DMX. And by the time you get to ready to meet him, like that song, when you analyze and listen to that song, you almost say to yourself, man, like I don't even know if Tupac could have dug this deep with a song like that. So he definitely filled the void, and he almost made you forget about Tupac. Like that. That's how great he was at this time in 1998. And you got to mention Belly too. He came out with a movie called Belly, with Nas, and Method Man was in there too. I mean, the movie holds up pretty well. I think DMX, one of the better, maybe the best actor that rapper actor that we've ever seen. I thought he was great in that movie. Wasn't really a big fan of Nas as an actor, but you could see the discrepancy between Nas and DMX's personalities in that movie. Obviously, I think Nas is the better rapper, but the problem is with Nas. I think if you don't really know his music, he might come off like he's more of like a generic rapper. Yeah, like to most people that don't listen to rap, but DMX, I think he was able to kind of, he was able to appeal to a demographic that Nas wasn't able to appeal to. Like DMX appealed to metalheads, because he had such a, unique background and such a unique personality and, struggling with addiction and struggling with mental issues. He had like a raw sense of emotion that I think that Nas didn't have. So you can see the different personalities in Belly. And then with the music too, I just think DMX, especially on this album here, he was able to appeal, to certain fans that rappers like Nas and even Jay-Z to a degree, didn't appeal to. But hey, man, we're gonna get right down going with "It's Dark and Hell Is Hot." I'll tell you, man, I really think the album has aged extremely well. I think it's. I mean, I was never like one of those guys that put it as, one of the best 10 albums in hip hop history. But the more and more I listen to it, I think it's definitely, worthy of that acclaim. There's really not one bad track on here. Even if I were to pick one track that is just, I'm not going to say it's bad. It's not something you're going to be in the mood to listen to all the time. It's the song X is Coming. And, even DMX has kind of, reiterated this track, several albums later. I Can Feel It, the Phil Collins song. I mean, those are probably my two least favorite, but, they're still good though. And I could still see how they could appeal, to people that would even put it as, their favorite songs on the album, depending on your taste. So there's really not one bad track on here. And this is kind of like a no limit philosophy where you're giving us a lot of, quantity and quality, at the same time. So, every single track I think is great, to be honest with you. But the first track on the album is actually the intro. The intro is incredible. It was actually produced by Irv Gotti. And, that's, I think, what's hitting me more than anything now, like listening to the album and reviewing it now, is how much of a team effort this was. The Ruff Ryder dudes, they really, raised DMX. It's almost like what TDE did for Absol and Kendrick. Like they stuck by them throughout when they were younger and stay with them through all the legal trouble and everything. And then eventually, Def Jam got a piece of the pie. But then Irv Gotti, got a job with Def Jam, and he's the reason why Lyor Cohen was able to recruit DMX. So it was really a team effort, and Irv Gotti was involved heavily in the promotional stuff and even some of the production on the album. So the intro, it's not just an intro. I mean, you could have easily just did, some sort of generic intro here, but DMX just, he gave us one of the hardest tracks on the album with the intro. The intro is just fucking great. It's just grimy, it's aggressive. And, FIFO from Dead End Hip Hop, he really nailed this album, like his thoughts on it. Like that, it was his first year of high school, and it was my first year of high school too. And like when you get to that fall, like everybody was listening to this album, especially Ruff Ryders Anthem. Like the football team, the basketball team. Someone was actually playing this on the bus on the way to a game. And we actually had the JV coach was actually black. This is freshman year, but the JV coach is actually black. And the Ruff Ryders Anthem is on the bus, and then he goes. I don't know what we were expecting. He just comes up to the radio. He turns the volume all the way down, and he's just like, "Shut that shit off." And then one of the guys on my team, his name was Joe Bacchino, who actually quit the team a couple weeks later. He just goes to me and he says, "Man, I thought he was supposed to like that music." So my point is, I just want to show you how crazy people were about playing this album, and FIFO was right. Like even the girls liked the album. Everybody loved it. It was a nice little change of pace from '97, where Puffy dominated the scene, and then you got DMX, who's this hardcore rapper, dominating the mainstream. Really, maybe one of the last times we saw like a guy that was like no nonsense when it came to hip hop, become the face of mainstream. It's very similar to like Austin's run in '98. It's very similar. Like Nas even said, like, this is when DMX took over the world. I even stated, Austin owned the world in '98. If you look at different forms of entertainment, basketball, baseball, rap music, wrestling, '98, it seemed like '98 had like a new face in each and every sport to a degree. Well, except for the NBA. That was Jordan's last, amazing year. But hey, man, yeah, the intro doesn't get enough credit. I think the intro is grimy. It's crazy. It's a complete song too. So Ruff Ryders anthem and then fucking with D, the start of this album just hits you like a ton of bricks. Like this is why I listen to rap, because I've always been into sports, always been into basketball, weightlifting, and I always want to listen to stuff that's going to get the juices flowing, and it just gets you pumped up, and it just gets you motivated, and that's what the beginning of this album does. This is really like an athlete's album. I'll just say that about it. But Ruff Ryders anthem is interesting, man, and it really is. It once again, this is one of those tracks where I think initially when you hear it, it's just like, all right, this is the Ruff Ryders anthem. It's not that big of a deal. It's just kind of like a secondary intro track. But I think when you first heard it, you didn't know it was going to become, maybe DMX's biggest song. Like, you really didn't know. And the interesting thing about this was Swizz Beatz' only track on the album, and it's his first track ever. Swizz Beatz would go on to have an incredible career, and he became more of a mainstream producer. It was fool's gold, though. I think, the Ruff Ryders anthem, it really changed, the game in terms of producers. And not for the better, you could argue. I mean, this probably hurt a lot of great producers like Pete Rock and RZA. I think after the success of Ruff Ryders anthem, I think a lot of producers felt like they couldn't, sample anymore. I know. Someone stated that RZA's biggest mistake was that he stopped sampling, or felt like he couldn't sample because of the success of this song right here. And Pete Rock was always very critical. He was like, it doesn't really take a lot of skill to make beats like this. But he didn't use samples. He basically just made it from whatever machine he made it from. I'm not like a production expert, so I don't know exactly what machine he used, for this. But the bottom line is, it was great, and it had almost had like a rock and roll feel. DMX was a little bit hesitant to kind of write to it at first, but then Swizz just kind of talked him into doing it, and was like, fuck it. He just did it. He was like, it just sounds too simple. It's like eeny meeny miny mo. He's like, give a dog a bone, leave a dog alone, let a dog roam and he'll find his way home. Oh, you think I'm funny? Well, you don't know me, money. It's a pretty simple writing to a very unorthodox beat, especially for hip hop at the time. But it was catchy. The hook was catchy. I think the remix is even better, man. I love the remix, but yeah, I think Ruff Ryders anthem is a great track. I mean, it doesn't really strike me as a rock and roll track, but I think what really put the song over the top is the video with everybody, all the guys in the hood with the motorcycles. I just thought it was different. It was cool, and you don't have like one female in there just dancing so they could try to sell the video. So it was definitely unique at the time. And then you follow it up with Fucking with D, which is a great track. It's hard as hell. DMX even reflects on some of the stuff that happened in the past, where he's gonna repent one day, just not right now. You hear my shit up in the street, I'm kind of hot right now. It's like, I don't give a fuck about anybody, cause ain't saying nothing. So yeah, this is just one of those tracks that I don't think it gets enough credit. I mean, it's just raw, and it's hard as hell. And yeah, I love that track right there. And then, there's a couple of like introspective tracks on the album. Look Through My Eyes. It's now that I kind of looked through the lyrics, and I was looking at Genius too, it's very similar to Hail Mary in terms of the messaging here, where I'm not a killer. I'm not a killer, but don't push me. He's like, I got a good heart, but this heart could get ugly. Very, very similar takes in terms of, Hail Marys, similar to Look Through My Eyes. But Look Through My Eyes, I think on this album, DMX was able to make introspective and, slow paced songs, but these have more of a, spiritual feel to them than I think some of the songs on Flesh of My Flesh. I remember some people bitched about how Flesh of My Flesh had too many slow songs, which is true, but I thought they were dope. But I think these two tracks, Look Through My Eyes and Let Me Fly, I just think a lot of the mainstream connected with these a lot more. Let Me Fly has a great hook as well, and they really, like on this one, this is where he, talked about the devil. Like I sold my soul to the devil, and the price was cheap. And I think he even reflected on the, the situation where his friend actually, tricked him into smoking crack. And he talked about that being like the biggest, curse of his life. And he has to live with that curse. So yeah, I think those tracks are dope. I talked about Get At Me Dog already, but that was the first single. That's what really brought DMX to the dance. They actually sampled, the BT Express in that song. It ain't nothing good for you, and not everything is good for you. Whatever the name of that BT Express song was, Mace had actually sampled that song as well. But on Get At Me Dog, it really worked. That's really. So I wanted to say this about the samples. This is really, I would say, one of the only samples that feels very similar to the original. But what they did with Get At Me Dog, they just made this like a hard ass song. I mean, it was great. Originally this was a Tupac diss, and then he kind of switched it to K Solo at the end of the track. But to me, like the highlight of that is when he's making fun of the white girls in scary movies. He's like, I don't know how to act. And then it was like, protected by Viper, stand back. So I love the ending of Get At Me Dog. But yeah, Get At Me Dog was pretty big. I mean, it wasn't as big as Ruff Ryders Anthem, but Funkmaster Flex even said it. It was the biggest song in New York City, like in the spring of '98. And I really think, like when you look back on it, I think '98, definitely got off to a slow start. Like in terms of like albums that you would get excited about. I mean, there really wasn't a lot to choose from at first. I passed on the Locks album. The Capadonna album was cool, but when you look back on it, I think it was somewhat of a disappointment. And when Daz's album came out, I always thought it would be a big deal, but that was really. It really didn't do anything for Death Row. So I think the first quarter of 1998 was kind of a depressing like season, I think, for hip hop. And it wasn't until the summertime where you had Def Jam just up, releasing a lot of great stuff. And then obviously, No Limit had their thing going on as well. So eventually, as the year went on, it ended up being one of the best years, in hip hop history. And a lot of it had to do with DMX. So like I was saying, guys, I think X is Coming. It's not for everybody. It's probably the hardest song on the album. So if you're really like a horrorcore fan, I would say X is Coming is dope. Some of the lines there are a little bit questionable, but I think if you interpret it as he's rapping from a certain perspective of three different crimes being committed, it's a little bit easier to digest. I think Damien is genius. I think it's phenomenal. I mean, there's multiple tracks on this album where DMX has alter egos. Stop Being Greedy is good DMX and bad DMX. So this is the conversation with the devil. I mean, the beat is dope. And that's one of the things about the album that is fascinating. When I hear some of these samples, they were flipped geniusly. I just don't think there's a lot of similarities with besides the Get At Me Dog sample and Crime Story, every single sample just looks like it was flipped, and it doesn't even sound like the sample, and especially with Damien. But Damien is dope because of the conversation. What DMX did here, I originally thought this was Drag On that played the devil, because it sounds a little bit like him, but apparently it's DMX, and DMX just did a good job with it. Like, I think it's impressive here that DMX was able to really, showcase how multidimensional he is. Like, and this is one of those songs where it just sounds like a laid back conversation, where he's just kind of like laughing. He's like, yeah, that's what I've been wanting all my life. He's like, not really. So it's a little bit different, but it flows really well. The concept is very dope about him selling his soul to the devil and being willing to kill his own friends to get what he wants, which has become a rap icon that can have sex with whatever kind of girls that he wants. And yeah, I mean it's really a dope concept. The Damien song. It's dark, it's gritty, and it's just the way DMX was able to separate himself, because it's just hard to believe that's even him, but it's dope. All right, so How It's Going Down was like the female single of the album. I gotta say, it was good. I gotta say, this is one of the better tracks on the album. And how many times can you actually say that the crossover mainstream attempt is one of the better tracks on the album? I didn't think it was forced. I think, naturally, I don't know if DMX is like comfortable making this type of songs, but the story was actually good here about how he's trying to have an affair with a woman that has already has a husband and already has kids, and they're trying to make it work. And I just think it was pretty. I mean, look, the story is what it is. I think DMX actually connected with the story, and that's why it worked. But it didn't sound forced, though. It didn't sound like It didn't sound watered down. It felt soulful. It felt natural. I think Drake even paid tribute to this song on one of his albums. But yeah, How It's Going Down. It was really the song that I think put it over the top for the females. Anytime you sell 4 million records, you're not really crossing over to just the white community. You're also bringing in some of the females too, which is what Snoop did. But DMX did it as well, and I think this song definitely did that. All right, Crime Story is a great track. Actually, Irv Gotti actually produced it with Little Rob. This sample here, I think it's from the Hell Up in Harlem soundtrack. Sample here is pretty much identical to the sample, so this definitely worked though. It's a dope track. If anyone remembers, Nas actually used the same beat on a song. I think it was called True Dialect. It was unreleased, but it was from the Nas Finest 2 mixtape. So when I heard it, yeah, it's definitely a familiar beat. The Crime Story is definitely dope. It's a little bit baffling though, because he turns himself in at the end of the story. He's actually wanted by, he actually kills somebody, then the cops are out to get him, then he actually ends up killing the cops, and then I didn't even realize it was actually Ja Rule that was doing the impersonator. He's like, "What the fuck you done did? Now the police are at my crib." Like that was actually Ja Rule that they using that for that little message there. So I never knew that, so that was interesting. But yeah, the last verse is pretty dope about how he takes his all the Rottweilers or the pit bulls with rabies, puts the harnesses on them. He's like, "I bet you'll never expect that dogs with rabies are in the cut." But then eventually he turns himself in. But it's definitely a dope story, especially the part of the story where the police knock on his door and he pretends to be a girl, and he actually gets them to leave without even opening up the door. So it's definitely dope. I wouldn't say it's like the best like storytelling rap in hip hop history, but the beat is dope, and he was able to flow through that really, really bouncy sample. So yeah, next track is Stop Being Greedy. Stop Being Greedy. The sample is really, really dark. It's actually Diana Ross. I think I think the sample was called my favorite something about being obsessed with a gun or something like that. But yeah, I mean, really, I just wanted to say it was the second single. It was the B side to Get At Me Dog. But I think with this track is you could see DMX's versatility in terms of being evil and being good and righteous in one song. So you get the good version and the bad version of him. It's kind of similar to Biggie's "Give Me the Loot." Not exactly the same situation, but that's a sign of a great artist, that you could have a good side and a bad side and showcase both of them in one track. ATF is just it feels like it's only a minute. It's just fast paced. It almost feels like a dream sequence of him trying to get away from the ATF. ATF is like tobacco firearms and weapons. I mean, they're really one of the most aggressive. I mean, it's really almost like superior to the FBI, I guess. And yeah, I mean, it's just a fast-paced storytelling track about him, trying to get away from them, and it ends with boom, 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 open the door, ATF. So that track is dope. It really reminds me of Raekwon's Spot Rushers, just in terms. It feels like just when you see where that was on Only Bid for Cuban Links, it's in the same spot. And it's just nice and fast paced. It's just one verse, so it kind of reminds me of that. All right, For My Dogs. This is definitely a underrated track, a great track. I think what I really didn't care for at first, like growing up, was it sounded like a bunch of generic rappers, like until you got to the DMX verse. But when I listen to it now, I think the rappers are fine. A lot of them from Ruff Ryders. Obviously, this is the first time we've ever heard Drag On. Who I would say had a really good career with Ruff Ryders. Even, you could argue it was somewhat disappointing. But the selling point for My Dogs is the beat. The beat is just dope. It almost sounds like religious Hail Mary inspired bells, and I love it. And then you hear DMX's, voice in the background. When he says, you know what I want to say. But hey, I love DMX's verse. He has the last verse on this song. It's actually one of my favorite songs now. Originally, I thought this might have been the weak link of the album because it's a posse cut. I'm not a big fan of posse cuts, especially with rappers that really never, stuff really never panned out for them, that type of thing. Then you have the Phil Collins song, I Could Feel It. This kind of puts you in touch with DMX's spiritual side. I think DMX even tried to make a gospel record at one point. So, he's a very religious dude. You learn that his grandmother, he even mentions his grandmother on The Convo, where, the grandmother really, took care of him and put him in touch with God and his religious side. So you get to feel that on I Could Feel It. The Phil Collins song is immortal. Obviously, I was thinking of Kevin Garnett. Whenever this song comes on, I think Kevin Garnett actually used this song when the Celtics hung up his jersey and they started crying. You remember that? And then you have The Prayer. The Prayer was definitely dope. This is the start of DMX having a sequence of prayers on each and every album. This might be my favorite one because it almost feels like it's a song by the way it goes. It's dark, and then it's uplifting as well, and then it sets the stage for the conversation with God. Where I love this track, and this really puts the album over the top. I mean, think about it. Like when Belly came out, you had all those singles that were really dominating the airwaves. But then when Belly came out, they actually used this song, to sell the Belly movie because it's very a lot of the tracks on this Dark and Hell is Hot really set the stage for Belly. I would say Crime Story, ATF, those are really a glimpse into the Tommy Buns character, from Belly. I would definitely say that. But in the Convo, at the end of Belly, DMX actually, goes undercover and tries to, become a priest and get in. But eventually, he's actually won over by spirituality and committing to God. So he has this conversation with God here. He's actually playing God and he's playing himself in the same situation. My favorite line was, "I tried doing good, but good ain't too good for me. Misunderstood why you chose the hood for me. I just had to work hard at it. Went to grandma for the answers and she told me that God had it. So what am I to do? Confused and full of questions. Am I born to lose or it's just a lesson?" That's one of the best lines of the album. So, yeah, it's good. And then the end of the song, you could just tell, God definitely wins him over, and he reflects on all these bad things that happened and how eventually, it was me that made you see the light. And so it ended up being really good. I mean, it's definitely a dope beat. It's a dope concept. And it worked really well for the Belly movie, like in terms of the promotion of it. I just thought it was a dope song. That's a song that really doesn't get a lot of attention, I think, when you look back on it. And then we have the finale, the posse cut. We have NIGGAZ done started something featuring the Locks and Murder Mace. So this must have been recorded before like Mace and Puffy really started making it big. So I'm assuming this was recorded maybe in like early '97, maybe like late '96. I don't even know, but you know, I thought the Locks sounded good. This was the start of, you know, Mace never really, you know, wanted to kind of, I mean, look, he ended up quitting Bad Boy, became a priest because Puffy probably fucked him out of his publishing. But the Locks, you know, they were fucked from the get-go. But hey, you know, they were adamant. Eventually, they were adamant that they wanted to, you know, be with Ruff Ryders and move away from Bad Boy. And this was the Locks without, you know, Puffy really watering them down. And I thought they sounded great, especially Styles P. I thought Styles P probably had the best verse out of anybody from the Locks. I think Sheik's, you know, set the tone. I think it's a great posse cut. Yeah, I know some people that don't like DMX, and that's the thing. I know Beezy from Dead End Hip Hop, like he was not a big DMX fan. He said, man, like you know, he never found DMX to be lyrical. Didn't get what the case was. So this is his favorite song on the album. But I think Beezy's one of those dudes that's more of a traditional like rap fan. So yeah, DMX would appeal to, you know, the untraditional. I used to have friends that liked DMX and that were metalheads. So he really would appeal to, you know, the non-traditional hip hop fans. But yeah, this one dude that I went to school with, this gotta be DMX's best verse. It's a hard verse. It's long. It's lyrical. I thought DMX was great on this verse. He had so many like, you know, hard ass lines here where he said, I like pussy, but not up in my face, so give me 3 feet. It just shows you how things have changed in our society with guys just not wanting to eat pussy. I mean, that's like one of the things about rap. Like you notice a lot of rappers, they be into women, they be into girls, but they would never want to admit to being like pussy eaters. So, you know, that's one of the DMX lines here. But give me 3 feet. And then he had another line where he's like, "I get you what you came for, surgery with the chainsaw." And yeah, it's definitely a great verse. I mean, it really is. I mean, I just think he was lyrical here. It was long. He sounded hungry as hell. It was definitely like the perfect way to end the album. Even though this sounds like it probably was one of the first songs to ever be done. But yeah, I mean, it's really, this was a wild ride, man. I mean, this really came together. They took their time. You know, this took over a year to make. You know, I think originally Get At Me Dog and Stop Being Greedy, like they really got a lot of attention. But, you know, like right before the album came out, it just feels like the last couple of months, you know, it feels like DMX did the intro, Ruff Ryders anthem, Fucking With D, Let Me Fly. A lot of the best stuff just kind of came together at the end. And that's what really put the album over the top, where it could get like 4 to 5 million in sales. So, yeah, this is a collaborative effort. This is a collective effort. And then what DMX did with Flesh of My Flesh, I'll definitely want to touch on that at another time. That album will always be, like, to me, like that will always probably have more of a special place in my heart, because I ended up passing up on It's Dark and Hell Is Hot. I never like officially bought this thing. Like, to be honest with you, like I never even bought it for myself. I just had it on, you know, mixtape dubs or CD burns or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I bought Flesh of My Flesh before it even came out. The record store that I was at in my town, they had Flesh of My Flesh before it even came out. So I always thought that was cool. And the fact that DMX was able to do 2 albums in 1 year. And, you know, I think that's what it has on Tupac's situation. With Tupac, it was his 4th and 5th albums, you know, back to back in the same year. This was DMX's first 2 albums. And, you know, I think just in 1 year, I think he became the MVP of rap. I think he exceeded what, you know, in terms of star power and in terms of marketability, I think he exceeded what Master P did. I think even if you're going to ask me in 98, like, who's the biggest star? Like, who is the bigger draw? DMX or Jay-Z? It's definitely, for as successful as Jay-Z was in 98. And yeah, you know, like in 98, that's when it all came together for Jay-Z, where he finally started, you know, reaching the goals that he set for him at Reasonable Doubt, where he said it was going to go triple platinum. Yeah, he did that with Hard Knock Life. He definitely did. But for as good as that was, I still think DMX you know, in '98. This was his year. There's no debate about it. There's no disputing it. I mean, who's the MVP in '98 for rap music? Is definitely DMX. What's the more interesting question is who is the MVP of '98 for all of entertainment, sports and entertainment? You know, is it Jordan? Is it Sammy Sosa? Is it Mark McGuire? Is it Ken Griffey Jr.? Is it DMX? And then lo and behold, is it Stone Cold Steve Austin? So it depends on your personal taste, but there's a lot of similarities between Austin and DMX. You know, it took them time. Like if you look at where Austin was in '91 and DMX was in '91, '92 with Unsigned Hype, and you know, you could definitely compare, you know, Austin and WCW to DMX with Columbia and Rough House, about how they, you know, he was never allowed to come out and he was overshadowed by Criss Cross and Cypress Hill. They're very similar. And then, you know, they were both very similar in terms of attitude and aggressiveness. And, you know, this is where it exploded. So I'll just end it right there, man. That's DMX. It's Dark and Hell is Hot. I would definitely say one of the best rap albums of all time, easily, and I'm out.